Hello. You need to go to page 506, solving equations with rational numbers. I would like for you to complete the warm-up on your own. So you're going to pause the video, do 1 through 6, and then unpause the video, and we will check our answers together. Go ahead and pause and get started. Okay. Hopefully you've done 1 through 6. We are supposed to mentally determine the numbers that make each equation true. On number 1, -6 plus 6, we should say that A equals 0. Number 2, 11 plus something gives us 0. 11 plus a -11 would give us 0. So B would be -11. For number 3, C plus D, something plus something is 0. We could have lots and lots of different answers here. If I had a -4 and a +4, that would give me 0. Lots of different answers there. On number 4, E, if you cross cancel, those 3's become 1's, those 5 becomes 1's. If you didn't cross cancel, you're just multiplying straight across and getting 15 over 15. So E is 1. On number 5, 7 times something is 1/7. Well, 7 over 1 times 1 over 7 would give us 1 whole. If you multiply straight across and get 7 sevenths or cross cancel, F is 1. And then number 6, G and H equals 1. We could have lots of answers for that one as well. You can look back up here to number 5. So lots of answers. We could do 6 times 1/6 or 8 times 1/8. Any answer would get us to 1 whole. Okay, so lots of different answers for number 6 and lots of different answers for number 3 as well. Okay, let's move on to activity 1. You are following along and writing everything that I write, please. For each equation, determine which solution, A or B, is correct. Circle the correct solution. Be prepared to explain your thinking. I want to go ahead and show you how we're going to solve. So we're not just circling a solution A or B. We're actually going to start solving these. So there's a whole bottom half of your workbook, and we're going to actually solve these, okay? So go ahead and label this will be problem A, B, C, and D. And let's start with letter A. If I have -1/2 times something is -5. To solve for an unknown, to solve for that X, so the variable, you do the inverse operation. This front of the equation says -1/2 times X. The inverse of multiplication is to divide. So I'm going to divide this side by 1/2, and I'm going to divide this side by 1/2, and it's a -1/2. On the left, a -1/2 divided by -1/2 is a +1x. So I've got my variable, my letter by itself. On the right, now I can solve. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. I'm going to keep that first fraction the same and multiply by the reciprocal. And when I multiply straight across, I'm going to get a positive 10 over 1 or 10. So on A, your solution is 10. Okay, that is how we are solving these. For letter B, this says something plus a -2 is -6.5. Okay. Again, we want to get that letter by itself. Remember, also the other way to write this would be x minus 2. Something minus 2 is a -6.5. Okay. To solve, you use the inverse operation. So if it says minus 2, to get that x by itself, we're going to add 2 to both sides. A negative 2 plus 2 is 0. We got the x by itself, which is the goal. And then on the left, a negative 6.5 plus 2. Remember, different signs, find the difference. There's more negatives, so your answer will be negative. So we should get a negative 4.5. Let's come down and do letter C. Negative 2 plus something is 1/2. We're going to solve using the inverse operation. So even though you may know the solution, I still want you to practice solving. I need that x by itself, which means I need to get rid of this negative 2. In order to make that 0, I would add 2 to both sides. So a negative 2 plus 2 is 0. It's gone. I've got the letter by itself. And 2 wholes plus 1/2 is 2.5. And then finally, letter D. I've got negative 2 times something is a negative 9. Again, to get the letter, to get the variable by itself, we're going to do the inverse operation. This says negative 2 times x. The inverse of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide both sides by that negative 2. On the left, a negative 2 divided by a negative 2 is a positive 1 whole x, 1x. We just write x. And then on the right, a negative 9 divided by a negative 2 is a positive answer. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. And 9 halves, 9 divided by 2, we know is 4 and 1/2. Okay, that is how we're going to be showing our work today using the inverse operation. Let's move to activity 2. It says analyze the 4 equations shown, and we're going to match the equations that have the same solution. You should have 2 pairs of equations. So take a look at those and think to yourself, which 2 equations are the same or we're matching? You should have 2 sets that are the same. Okay, I'm gonna start with this one just because it's the first one. My first pair of equations was the same solution. X plus 2 is 8. We could say is the exact same thing as that last one. X minus a negative 2 is 8. Because we know that minus a negative, alert, double negative, you change into a positive. Okay? Explain your thinking. We know that x minus a negative 2, again, we circle those double negatives and they both become positives, right? So these both equal 8. I'm going to just write minus a negative equals a positive. Okay. It says to solve the addition equation and show your thinking. So the addition equation was x plus 2 equals 8. Again, to solve that, we use the inverse operation. So instead of adding 2, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides to get that variable, the letter by itself. 2 minus 2 is 0. It's gone. I got the x by itself, and 8 minus 2 is 6. Solve the subtraction equation using the same inverse operation you used in part B. Well, the subtraction one is x minus a negative 2 is 8. Okay, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. Again, that looks like that. We're subtracting 2 from both sides. 2 minus 2 is gone. That makes 0. And I still get 6. Okay. It says, are there any other methods for solving this pair of equations? Well, yes, subtracting 2. Okay, let's write that subtracting 2 which is from part B, is the same as adding a -2. So when you subtract 2, it is the same thing. If I do -2, that is the same thing as adding a -2. Okay, subtracting 2 and adding a -2 is the same thing. Okay, let's move on to the next page. My second pair of equations with the same solutions are, I'm going to go back up here. X minus 2 is 8, and x plus a -2 is 8. So I'm going to write those down here. X plus a -2 is 8, which is the same as x minus 2 is 8. And that is basically, y'all, what we just said right here. That subtracting 2 is the exact same thing as adding a -2. Okay, so these two are showing that. Which again is the exact same thing as explain your thinking. Okay, so subtracting a value is the same as adding. It's called its inverse. It's inverse. It's opposite. So subtracting something is the same as adding its inverse. So example, x plus a -2 is the same as just x minus 2. So subtracting 2 is the same as adding a -2. Solve the addition equation. So the addition equation was x plus a -2 is 8. I need this -2 out of there. If it's a -2, the inverse is adding 2 to both sides. -2 plus 2 is 0. Those cancel out, leaving me with my x and 10. And if you put 10 back in for x, 10 plus a -2 would be a positive 8. Solve the subtraction equation using the same inverse operation. The subtraction one is x minus 2 is 8. If it says x minus 2, the inverse is to add 2 to both sides. And -2 plus 2 is 0. It's gone, leaving me with my x. And I get 10. And if you put 10 back in for x, 10 minus 2 is 8. Are there any other methods for solving this pair of equations? Again, we can say yes, that subtracting a -2 is the same as adding 2. Okay, they are the inverse operations. Okay, let's move on to activity 3. Okay, for each equation, we're going to choose the operation that would be used to solve the problem. It says you should not use the same operation for more than one equation. Got it. Not all of the operations will be used. And then we're showing our work and solving. Okay, again, we are going to solve any equation with an unknown variable by using the inverse operation. Okay, so if I were to solve this problem, -2/3 times something gives me 4 ninths. This is a multiplication equation. A number next to a letter means multiply. The inverse would be to divide this side by a -2/3 and divide this side by a -2/3. That is because anything divided by itself is 1 whole, right? Which just leaves me 1x. So I'm going to do 4 ninths divided by 2/3. Okay, if you notice up here, none of these say divide by 2/3. So if I'm going to do, I'm going to show my work real quick. -2/3 x equals 4/9. I'm dividing this side by a -2/3. I'm going to write a different number here so I have more room. Divide this side by a -2/3. And then this is my problem. 4/9 divided by a -2/3. We know we don't divide fractions, so it's really 4/9 times -3/2. Okay, so my operation is multiplying by a -3/2, which would be this one. Okay, let's continue working. I'm going to cross cancel. 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 9 3 times. And then this way, 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into 4 twice. And when I multiply straight across, I get 2/3, and I had a positive and a negative, which gives me a -2/3. Okay. I'm going to do another one with you. I'm going to cross that one out so we don't use it again. X minus a -2/3, alert, there's a double negative. I'm immediately going to change those into a positive. So it really says x plus 2/3 is 1 1/6. To solve, I'm going to subtract 2/3 from both sides. 2/3 minus 2/3 is 0, leaving me with my x. So on this one, I am subtracting 2/3 from both sides. Okay, it kind of looks like a negative, but it's a subtraction sign. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and solve. I need a common denominator, which would be 6. So I'm going to multiply this by 2, which means I have to multiply this by 2. And so I've got 1 1/6 minus 4/6. If you want to borrow, you can. I'm going to do 6 times 1 is 6 plus 1 is 7/6. Take away 4/6 is 3/6, which is the same as a half. So x is 1/2. Okay, here's what I would like for you to do. I would like for you to pause the video and finish those bottom 2 on your own, and then unpause to see if you got them correct. So I want you to be honest and pause to make sure you know that you can do these by yourself. Go. Okay, on the third one, it says x plus a -2/3. This is the same thing, guys. If I want a -2/3 by itself, you're going to do the inverse. You're going to add 2/3 to both sides. Remember, you can also write it like this. This is still showing that 2/3 is negative. So what you're doing for the operation is adding 2/3 to both sides to get that x by itself. I will go ahead and write it just like they did, just for the sake of doing it the way they have it written. And again, I'm going to add 2/3 to both sides. Because a -2/3 plus 2/3 is 0. I've got my x left, or by itself. Over here, I've got a -3 1/6. And I'm adding 2/3. Those are different signs. Find the difference. There's more negatives. I'm going to go ahead and throw my negative down there in my answer so I don't forget. 6 times 3 is 18 plus 1 is 19/6. And if I change 2/3 into 6, I'm going to multiply by 2. So that becomes 4/6. Okay. 19/6 minus 4/6, the difference would be 15/6. Or -2, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 3/6, which is the same as 1/2. Okay, so you should have got -2 1/2. Let's look at that bottom one. I've got -3/2 times something. The inverse is to divide by a -3/2 on both sides. And again, there's no negatives, or there's no division up there. So when you divide by a negative 3/2, that's the same thing as multiplying by a negative 2/3 when you keep switch flip. So I'm going to multiply by a negative 2/3. Okay, I'm going to rewrite my problem. Negative 3/2 times something is negative 3 1/2. I'm dividing this side by negative 3/2. I'm dividing this side by negative 3/2. Okay, I've got a negative divided by a negative, so my answer should be positive. Whenever we are dividing with mixed numbers, we have to change those mixed into an improper. So 2 times 3 is 6 plus 1 is 7/2. Keep, switch, flip, multiply by the reciprocal. So we have 7/2 times 2/3. Those 2's can cross cancel. So when I multiply straight across, I get 7/3, which is improper. That becomes 2 1/3. And again, I had a negative divided by a negative, so it should be a positive 2 1/3. Okay. Period, or bridges. I hope that you are starting to understand how to solve these equations by using the inverse operation. Okay, here is what I would like for you to do. I would like for you to read the summary for understanding. And then on the practice pages, I want you to do numbers 1 through 3 and 6. I want you to pause the video, actually test yourself on 1, 2, 3, and 6. And then when you are finished with 1, 2, 3, and 6, you're going to unpause the video and check with me. Okay, let's look at number 1. We were matching each equation with the operation that could be used to solve it. So again, if I had something plus a negative 10 to get that x by itself, I want this to be 0 on the right. So I would add 10 to both sides to get those to cancel out. So adding 10 would be right here. On B, if I were to solve this equation, I need x by itself. A number next to a letter says multiply, so the inverse would be to divide both sides. Divide both sides by a negative 10. You can think of this as 10 over 1. Keep, switch, flip. The inverse would be to multiply by a negative 1/10 when you multiply by the reciprocal. So multiplying by a negative 1/10 would be down here. On C, a negative 1/10 times x, the inverse is to divide both sides by a negative 1/10. Again, we don't divide fractions, we keep it, switch it, flip it. So that would be 5 times a negative 10 when you do the inverse operation. D, I see a double negative. So this is saying x plus 10. The inverse would be to subtract 10 from both sides, which would be here, right across. And on E, 1/10 times x, the inverse is to divide both sides by 1/10. When you keep it, switch it, flip it, it becomes multiplying by 10 over 1, or just 10. So E is here. Okay, let's look at number 2. Identify the mistake in solving each equation and then solve the equation correctly. Alrighty. Sometimes for me, it's easier to actually solve my way so I don't get confused with what they're doing and then go and see where our work is different, which might actually be what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do a negative 3x equals 6. To solve for x, that says multiply by negative 3, so you're doing the inverse and dividing both sides by a negative 3. And a negative 3 divided by a negative 3 is a positive 1x. And 6 divided by a negative 3 is a negative 2. So x should be negative 2. And guys, always remember you can put negative 2 back in for x. A negative 3 times a negative 2, is that positive 6? It is, so I know I did it correctly. What did they do incorrectly? Oh, they added 3 instead of divided by 3. Okay, let's look at that next one. I have x minus a negative 2 is 12. I'm going to go ahead and turn those double negatives into a positive. I know I need to subtract 2 from both sides because 2 minus 2 is 0. I've got that x by itself. So x is 10. If I plug 10 in for this x, is that 12? It sure is, so I know I've done mine correctly. Let's see what they did. We subtracted 2 from both sides. They added 2 to both sides. So they did the incorrect sign. They added 2, need to subtract 2. Let's look at the next one. 4/5 times something is a negative 9/10, so I need to divide both sides by 4/5. Okay, we don't divide fractions, we keep it, switch it, flip it, so I have a negative 9/10 times 5/4. I can cross cancel. And a positive and a negative is a negative. So I have a negative 9/8, which is 1 1/8. And then let's see what they did. Oh, and by the way, when you substitute back in for a problem like this, I would always just keep your negative 9/8. Because if I do 4/5 times negative 9/8, I've got negative 9/10. It does check out. Okay. Okay, let's see. They divided by 5/4 when they should have been dividing by 4/5, so they flipped it too soon. So they divided by the reciprocal. Needed to multiply by the reciprocal. So they were trying to do too many steps in one. Okay, what else did I assign? Number 3, solve each equation, show your thinking. Y'all, if you don't like that the variable is on the right side, rewrite it. Easy as that. We want to get the letter by itself. It says -8. The inverse would be to add 8 to both sides because a negative 8 plus 8 is 0. So I got my a by itself. I've got different signs. Find the difference. There's more positives. Remember, your larger number is going on top. So I've got a positive 3.5. And again, you can always substitute back in 3.5 for A to see if it checks out. On B, if it doesn't bother you that the letter's on the right side, you don't need to do anything. You just need to know that you're multiplying both sides, no, you're dividing both sides by a -3 to get that Y by itself. So right now, a number next to a letter says multiply. The inverse is to divide both sides by a -3. A -3 divided by a -3 is a positive 1Y. A -12 divided by a -3 is a positive 4. If you were to put 4 back in for that Y, a -3 times a positive 4 is a -12. It checks out. 2/5 times something is 8/15. So I'm going to do the inverse and divide both sides by 2/5 to get that x by itself. 2/5 divided by 2/5 is 1x. We don't divide fractions. We got to multiply by the reciprocal. So I have 8/15 times 5/2. I've got a positive divided by a negative, so my answer is going to be negative. I can cross cancel. 2 goes into 2 once and into 8 4 times. 5 goes into 5 once and into 15 3 times. So when I multiply straight across, I have 4/3 or 1 1/3. And again, it is negative. Okay, let's go to that last problem, number 6. Kyron drinks 6.4 ounces of milk each morning. How many days does it take him to finish a 32-ounce container? We're going to write and solve an equation for this situation. So if he's doing 6.4 ounces drinking each morning, 6.4 ounces each morning, how long will it take him to finish all 32 ounces? So 6.4 each morning times some amount of days gives me 32 ounces. So 6.4 times something gives me 32. That would be my writing the equation. And then to solve the equation, again, we're going to do the inverse operation. We're going to divide both sides by 6.4 to get that D by itself, the amount of days by itself. 32 divided by 6.4. You may not have a decimal on the outside. We're going to move it over once on the outside, which means we have to move it over once on the inside. If you don't see it on the inside, it's behind the number. It's a whole number. We still have to move it over once, and a 0 goes in that placeholder. So we're doing 320 divided by 64. 64 doesn't go into 3. 64 doesn't go into 32. Do a little bit of estimation. I know 60 times 5 is 300. So let's try 64 times 5. 32. So we got it. So it's going to be 5 days before they can finish the milk container. And then it says, what does the variable represent? Well, that D represents the amount of days. So D is the number of days it will take Kyron to drink 32 ounces. Okay. Okay. Make sure your next step is to start working on and continuing your spiral review for this week, getting a perfect score. Have a great day.